Qatar is the third largest customer of U.S. defense systems in the world. There are a lot of American jobs at stake when it comes to our relationship with Qatar. And the Qataris, over and over again, respond
Oh, you're kidding me.
when America is in crisis. They housed more than 70,000 Afghans during the evacuation of our forces and of Afghan allies. Almost nobody else in the world would do that. But the Qataris said yes because the United States asked them. They are an imperfect ally. They are an imperfect ally. This is a repressive regime with a bad history on human rights and worker rights, but they are a critical ally. But more to the point of the senator's resolution. The senator's main critique is that Qatar hosts Hamas, a terrorist organization. And I can understand why some may bristle at that notion. An ally of the United States playing host to Hamas. Qatar plays host to Hamas because they were requested to do so by the United States. Hamas established an office there because the United States asked them to do that in 2012, because we knew we needed an ability to talk to Hamas. Qatar played a contributing role in Egypt-led negotiations to get a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in 2014, 2019, and 2021. Why? Because we were able to talk to Hamas through their presence in Qatar. And yes, Qatar has been a conduit to send money to Hamas. A lot of people may bristle at that notion as well. Our ally, Qatar, sending money to the Hamas political organization inside Gaza, as they have done for years. Qatar did that at Israel's request. Israel approved at a Security Cabinet meeting in 2018 an arrangement whereby Qatar, through their relationship with Hamas, would send money into Gaza, quote, in coordination with security experts to retain calm in villages in the south, but also to prevent humanitarian disaster in Gaza. That was the Israeli position. So I understand the discomfort of an ally having a relationship with Hamas. It has come at the request of the United States and at the request of Israel, and is absolutely vital to protecting our ability to get hostages out. You want to make sure those hostages never leave, then cut off Qatar's role as an intermediary. You want to fundamentally harm U.S. interests in the region? You want to shut down our airbase? You want to eliminate the ability of Qatar to help us again when we are in need, as we were, as we evacuated Afghanistan, then downgrade their status. And for those reasons, I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President.
The senator from North Carolina.
Mr. President, I thank my colleague from Connecticut. I mean, that was beautiful. It's articulate. And it was a beautiful articulation of all the reasons to support my bill. You see, this week, some of the hostages' families, they're in Washington to meet with leaders from all branches of government. And I've met with them for many, many times. And every time I come away deeply moved by the strength and resilience that they're showing in the face of an unspeakable evil. And I let them know that not only are all levels of our government working to bring their loved ones home safely, but that I would do everything in my power to make it happen. Sometimes that means being direct, even with friends like Qatar. Sometimes that means making allies uncomfortable. But the truth of the matter is that friends are honest with one another. So this is more than about just a bilateral relationship between two nations. This is about the well-being of U.S. citizens and a native of my home state, North Carolina. So while the Senate won't be able to pass this today because of the objection, it's my hope that we can work through the committee process to get this bill across the finish line. But more importantly, while Qatar has done less than hoped and expected, and other allies like Egypt have thankfully stepped up to fill the unfortunate void, let this bill, let it be a tool to move the hostage negotiations forward and secure the release of all the hostages being held in Gaza. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, last month, the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas resisted Democrats' latest attempt to intimidate the federal judiciary. This all started a year ago when Senate Majority Leader Schumer sent a letter to the Chief Judge of the Northern District of Texas urging him to change the way that cases were assigned in that district. In short, the Majority Leader is unhappy with single-judge divisions in Texas that have handed down rulings that he doesn't agree with. Well, forget for a moment the fact that the left has been more than happy to file lawsuits in courts they believe will be friendly to their arguments. Set that aside for a moment. But the Majority Leader seeks to avoid more liberal losses in the courtrooms. He wants the Chief Judge to ignore federal law, literally ignore the law which establishes which courts have jurisdiction and venue over a given case. As Senator Schumer sees it, this change, which would create a random selection assignment system, would prevent judges who are nominated by Republican presidents from hearing as many high-profile cases. Well, the Majority Leader might be forgiven for his naivete or his misunderstanding of actually what controls what venue and what jurisdiction is under the law, but the problem is he went a step further. He ended his letter with a clear threat. If the Northern District didn't comply with his demands, he said Congress will consider more prescriptive requirements. In other words, he said, do what we want, and if you don't, we'll do it for you. Well, for some reason, the senator from New York thinks he should be the one to decide how cases are assigned in the Northern District of Texas. Late last month, the Chief Judge, David Godbee, wrote the Majority Leader a letter reminding him of something that the leader already knew, which is that assignment of cases is not governed by politics, but by existing law. A federal statute that Congress passed, signed by a president, gives district courts the authority to decide how to assign cases for a given district. And unsurprisingly, there's no requirement that chief judges consult with the Majority Leader of the Senate when deciding how to assign cases within their district. There's this thing called separation of powers that the Majority Leader may have overlooked or forgotten about. As Chief Justice Godbee noted in his letter, the district judges in the Northern District of Texas met to discuss this topic and reached consensus not to make the changes requested by Senator Schumer. While the Chief Judge of the Northern District was not swayed by the Majority Leader's implicit threat, that wasn't the end of the story. Regrettably, the Judicial Conference of the United States, in an effort to placate the Majority Leader, they recommended that district courts across the country randomly assign certain cases that seek to invalidate state or federal law. In other words, now The Judicial Conference has gotten into the act, ignoring existing laws passed by Congress and signed by presidents that establish which courts have jurisdiction and venue over a given case. Well, that provoked another telling reaction on the part of our Democratic colleagues. The majority leader rejoiced that this guidance that he sought would prevent MAGA right plaintiffs from being able to all but guarantee a hand-picked MAGA right judge. How insulting is that? These are life-tenured judges nominated by a president, confirmed by the United States Senate, and the majority leader suggesting that a judge who's taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States can be depended on to reach a predetermined result. Well, I know that's politics, but that's not the way the laws are supposed to be interpreted or applied by the courts. Thank goodness we have an independent judiciary in this country. It is one of the things that makes us unique in the world among democracies. A truly independent judiciary that calls balls and strikes.
What's going on? I'm just getting back.
Interprets the Constitution
Gang.
laws and applies them
Thanks
to a
for
given case.
joining. See if I can get a
Even when
split screen going. Just bear with me here for a minute
politicians get
while
caught
I
up
screw this
with
up for a second.
Their rhetoric and their
That
political
wasn't as bad
desires.
as I thought it would be.
Well, the majority whip, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, echoed the majority leader's position and noted that changing the way cases are assigned, he says, will help restore the public's trust in our court system and strengthen our democracy. I think what undermines the public's trust in our court system and undermines our democracy are these baseless attacks on judges, assuming that they are Republican judges or Democratic judges, they're MAGA right judges, whatever that's supposed to mean. I guess they mean they were appointed or appointed by President Trump, but also confirmed by the United States Senate. The irony of calling a Senate-confirmed federal judge a MAGA judge and talking about the importance of public trust in the judiciary is pretty rich. I want to commend Chief Judge Godbee and the judges of the Northern District of Texas from resisting this political pressure and commend them for doing what they know is right for their district and the people that live and litigate within that district. This was without a doubt the right decision for multiple reasons. As a practical matter, the majority leader's preferred case assignment scheme would likely subject litigants to logistical nightmares. I know Texas is a lot bigger than New York, but take the Northern District of Texas, for example. It's one of the largest judicial districts in the country, stretches over 100 out of our 254 counties, and encompasses more than 96,000 acres. If the Northern District of Texas were a state, it would be the 9th largest state. If Senator Schumer had his way, a suit filed in one division could ultimately be heard by any division within the Northern District. A woman challenging the state's abortion laws in Fort Worth could have to travel all the way to Lubbock for her day in court, and a company in Dallas challenging government overreach or perhaps a new environmental regulation would have to go all the way to Amarillo to have that case decided under this random assignment system. This would obviously create a lot of burdens on litigants, my constituents, Texans, American citizens. It would create a burden, it would be expensive, and hurdles that both parties in a case would have to overcome, and for no real purpose. We all know that cases decided by district judges get considered by circuit courts, appellate courts, and potentially even the United States Supreme Court. But the majority leader's political pressure on the Northern District would ultimately harm access to justice for those litigants who don't have the time or the money to travel long distances or pay their lawyers in order to do so. But the more fundamental issue is the constitutional one. Under the law, only Congress has the power to pass venue changes. That is where a case is heard, not the courts. The courts apply laws that the Congress passes, and which is signed into law by the President. The Constitution vests Congress with the sole authority to determine the structure and organization of the lower courts, and that includes venue laws, where cases are heard. From there, each individual district has the latitude to determine how cases are ultimately assigned. So if the majority leader wants to change the way that venue laws are applied, he can try to do so, but he's got to do so through a change in the law, not by trying to intimidate the judges in that division. Over the last years, our Democratic colleagues have repeatedly launched deeply concerning attacks against America's independent judiciary. Several years ago, 5 of our Democratic colleagues threatened that the Supreme Court would be, quote, restructured if it failed to rule a certain way in a case related to the Second Amendment. The following year, the majority leader, the senator from New York, stood in front of the Supreme Court.
What's going on, everybody?
And threatened 2 sitting Supreme Court justices by name if they didn't rule the way he wanted
How about
them
how
to
they
rule
leaked Dobson?
in a case involving abortion. He said, and I quote, "I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price, and you won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions." How shameful on the part of the majority leader to stand on the steps of the Supreme Court and to threaten the sitting justices unless they ruled in a particular way.
This is Dobson that he's referring to. The abortion ruling
Next year,
from a couple years back.
Just a few months
It's
after
not even an
President
abortion
Biden took
ruling.
office,
Is it?
our Democratic
you know what?
colleagues in both the Senate
Let's
and the
not
House
go there.
introduced a bill that
Oh God, my
will
Westlaw
allow
rep's
him
calling.
to pack the Supreme Court
He knows
with
that I
4 new
want to
liberal
get more
justices.
services, and I want those services, but
A couple of years later,
I don't
Senator
want to pay for
Wyden, the
that.
senator from
Just kidding.
Washington,
Just kidding.
from Oregon, advocated for the
It's
Biden
just- they're
administration
such
to
great
ignore
services
a
that
potential
I
court
want,
order
you know.
from a Northern District of Texas court because he didn't agree with it. He actually
God,
said
sorry, my kids need to
that
be.
the
they're
Biden
stomping around
administration should
upstairs.
ignore the ruling of a federal judge. Not appeal it, ignore it. Then 15 of our Democratic colleagues recommended slashing the Supreme Court's budget if it failed to meet their demand to implement a new code of ethics that had our Democrat colleagues' stamp of approval. And more recently, some of our Democratic colleagues have called on Justice Sotomayor to retire so President Biden can install a new liberal justice likely to serve for many years in the future.
This I didn't know.
Democrats' attack on our judiciary have
gonna have to do some
varied, but
research
the
on
theme
that.
is always the same. It's all about control. It's all about politics. It's all about outcomes, not justice and the rule of law. Their message is deliver the wins we want, impose a code of ethics that we wrote, and retire when we say. Well, we all know that
Or
lifetime
die
tenure
at your
is provided
desk
for federal
if we
judges
say. Seems like.
to provide for their independence, so they can't be intimidated, so they can't be forced
It's
to retire.
just to ensure that he's able to appoint
We
someone.
can't cut their pay for the same reason.
If he
Forget
loses the
this
election,
idea of fair and impartial courts.
it's
They
just a
want judges to
precautionary
fall in
measure. I mean,
line,
obviously they want to be able to appoint
Salute
someone.
smartly,
She's turning 70.
and follow orders.
That's not that old for a judge. I mean, they get up there.
As I said earlier, an independent judiciary is essential
How we
to
doing,
our
Stream?
democracy
How we
and the
doing? How
rule
we
of
doing?
law. It is the crown jewels of our government.
We're watching
of our
today to see if
Constitution.
they take up
The courts
Mayorkas, the
cannot
impeachment. They may have already addressed it. If that's the
and must
case, I'm
not be
sorry.
subjected to pressure campaigns from anyone, politicians,
Let's find
political activists,
How could we find
or anybody else.
We can.
The federal judiciary certainly
go
is not
back.
subservient to Congress. It is a separate and co-equal branch of the government.
Should we scrub through to see what they've
Co-equal.
talked about real quick? It's been going on for about
Our founders
2 hours.
deliberately designed a system of checks and balances to
All right.
prevent any one branch
It'll be easy to get
from
back to life.
forcing
Let's see
the
what we were missing. That looked like the prayer.
Assisting in an abortion. All these
boy.
regressive MAGA judges on the
See,
Supreme Court,
and this is what the last guy
in, the
speaking
other,
was talking
in some
about.
of the other federal courts,
You
and in
confirmed the
state
judges,
courts, all
Schumer.
come
You know what I'm saying?
from Donald
They're
Trump,
MAGA judges.
and he
they were appointed
appointing
by
MAGA judges,
maybe Donald Trump,
and
but
his
then they
goal
were confirmed
to
by the
restrict
Senate. So they're
women's
also your
freedoms
judge.
and to have
They're
Roe
a
v.
Senator
Wade
Schumer judge.
be
This'll, you know,
annihilated.
needs to retire.
Make no mistake about
All
it.
right, so he's not going to
Donald
be talking
Trump and
about.
MAGA Republicans own the code.
He's just.
Not 1 month ago, Republicans blocked legislation in
This
this
is it.
chamber that would have preserved
all he's got.
IVF protections under federal law. And while Donald Trump hopes people forget it, he himself was on record supporting a national abortion ban when he was president. So unsurprisingly, Donald Trump and MAGA
what's that,
Republicans
pizza?
are now trying to hide their anti-abortion records because they know how dangerously out of step their views are with the public. But they can't help themselves, as the president's speech showed 4 days ago. Again, he had to repeat that he was responsible.
Oh boy.
We want to address this issue as expert
Are they going to address
asking for more information about their plans for a multi-billion-dollar merger.
the impeachment?
If history is taught forward,
Oh my God.
we
my
need to know
kids.
about market shares in this industry. To the countries of NATO. Let me say that.
He's basically
unbelievable.
technically not a filibuster, but he's just talking.
In the House of Representatives,
Suck the air out of the room
pro-Putin
and not
radicals
addressing
say
the
we should
elephant.
reward Russia's violent invasion with a peace treaty.
Oh. All right. And who's next? Is it Mitch? Mitchy boy goes next. You know, so they can get out of there and get their ice cream. Are we excited? Is it going to be the same thing as yesterday?
America's the glue.
No one
that keeps
standing
the
behind
alliance
anybody.
together.
They'll hold a press conference.
critical
That's great, but
catalyst
we don't
of the
elect
allied
them to go to a
contribution.
press conference. We elect them
Nations
to
all over
stand
the
in this
world look to
chamber
Washington
together
guidance.
and make a point.
From before
That's
Russian
my point.
forces even advanced in February of 2022, I've urged the Biden administration to quit its hand-wringing and hesitation over delivering Ukraine the lethal tools it needed to defend itself. The president's unfounded
So they're not even going to
of
like
a century.
talk about the
So
impeachment.
I'll continue to urge our House colleagues to take up and pass the National Security Supplemental
It's too
without
bad.
delay. Now, on a different matter, I've spoken before about the effort led by our colleagues, Senator Capito and Senator Kramer, to block a coercive one-size-fits-all mandate from the Federal Highway Administration that would force states and localities to build transportation infrastructure the way the bluest coastal states do. I'm glad our colleagues,
Glad Mitch.
as many of our
Has
colleagues
his
who own
priorities.
small businesses,
Do you think he knows what's going on other than the fact that he needs his diaper changed and eat ice cream? I'm sorry. That's offensive. Shouldn't be offensive. He's very old and he should retire. He's retiring at the end of the year in November, but should have retired sooner. Yeah, I mean, what do you think, chat? Die at your desk? Retire? No one to fold them? I've heard that before, Pizza Duder. I totally agree. But, let's see. Getting to that. And now let's see, before we lose everybody here, we got...
Frustrated
Right.
By the
She did the
growing delays, the
Ghostbusters. I think when
deportative
it's basically
lift
this
from
lady,
US Air.
sorry, the senator,
202-224,
looking for
32,
Ghostbusters, looking for
54.
whistleblowers for like if you're the
Or
only
if you are
person in a government
working in a
building.
government
Like
building
I don't know
all
if you've
alone,
experienced this,
pick
chat,
up the
but
phone and call.
you ever
I
called
want
the
to
government, like an
hear
agency who's supposed to be
from
doing
you
something
and
because
other
that's what their taxpayer
government
dollars are used for to. And
Together,
then no one
we
ever
can
picks
be
up ever. It always goes to
Ghostbusters
voicemail. I've
and
had this
make
experience
Washington
personally.
work again
I'm actually
by
trying
getting the
to represent
bureaucrats
veterans
back to their
who
old
are trying
haunts.
to get
'Cause
veterans
I
benefits,
ain't afraid of
and
no
maybe they
ghosts.
need to appeal that process.
Thank
And
you,
so one of
Mr.
the things you have to
President,
do is,
and I
you know,
yield
get VA approval to be a lawyer who represents veterans with the VA. And it's been months and months and months and months. I had to reach out to my congressman to be like, get this, you know, get this pushed through. And then they come back like, oh, you didn't check off this one box here, silly box. And, you know, now we're waiting months and months and months again. But if I didn't talk to the congressman's office, I don't think they would have ever even picked up my application. Boy, these old people who work at a restaurant. Yeah, you're not kidding. You're not kidding. I mean, I remember, okay, I volunteered
Us
at an
refuses
old age
reasonable
home.
negotiations.
I
There
mean,
is no reason for Qatar
and that
to
look
continue
that you see
hosting
in
Hamas's
McConnell's
political
eyes
office
when he freezes up
or
is
any of
a
its
look I've
members
seen
in
at that
Doha.
place.
Side for a moment.
All right, and this is where we were, chat, but I'm going to jump to live. It's kind of crazy. If you haven't already, by the way, hit the subscribe button. We just hit 1,000 subscribers. Big landmark for the channel. Didn't think I was ever going to do it, you know? So thank you if you're subscribed. I truly mean that. Okay. So, did they break for lunch? I don't know. There's all these people, see all these people in and out of the chambers. Most of them are like clerks, and pages, and interns. You know, and you know, someone's commented yesterday that, you know, because they're in and out of fundraising all day. It's like that's not the excuse I want to hear, which is why there's never anybody sitting behind the folks who are making their impassioned speeches. It's not a great excuse. And if the excuse is, oh, we're going to have a press conference at 3 or whatever, it's, again, not electing you to go have a press conference. We want asses in the seats, in the chambers. That's just me. That's what you're elected for. So it's all, yeah, dog and pony show to some degree. You hear my dog complaining? I'm probably going to cut it right about now. We'll join back, pick it right back up after lunch. I'm going to feed the dogs. Maybe we'll get them on stream later. I don't know. You want to, Jago, does that sound like a good idea? You want to be on stream, buddy? Before we go, let's find out. Pizza Duder, I don't know if you're still with us. He wanted me to look into this. What the fourth turning is. Is it some sort of weird thing that's going to get me in trouble? Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's those like the 70-year cycle, right? Is that what we're saying? That is the fourth turning. Be well, sir. Yeah. I agree with that, right? With, you know, we have elections every few years, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, right? But that's not the actual cycle that we're in, you know. That's the cycle that we talk about, that we've set for ourselves. But the real cycles happen, it says 60 to 80 years, things change. So we're getting soft men, we're getting hard times. 80 years, right. Yeah, so we will see, my friend. I'll see you after lunch. Be well, and remember, knowledge is power. Subscribe for more.